The machete gleamed in the moonlight as Adiz pressed herself against the mud wall of the abandoned building, her heart hammering so violently she was certain they would hear it. 3 men stood just meters away, their voices low and menacing as they discussed what to do with the girls locked inside. She could hear whimpering through the wooden door, the sound of young voices pleading in Igbo and broken English. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, the recording app still running. One wrong move, one misplaced breath, and everything would end here in this forgotten corner of their village, where her husband's billion-naira empire was built on the screams of the innocent. But let's go back to where it all began, 3 days earlier, when Adiz Nwosu still believed she was living a blessed life. The red dust of Umura village swirled around the convoy of 3 gleaming SUVs as they pulled up to the massive church compound that had transformed the sleepy rural community. Victory Dominion Ministry stood like a monument to modern prosperity amid the traditional mud houses and palm wine bars that dotted the landscape. The church's aluminum roof caught the harsh afternoon sun, nearly blinding the villagers who gathered to watch Pastor Chinedu Nwosu and his elegant wife return from yet another crusade in Port Harcourt. Adiz stepped out of the air-conditioned vehicle, her expensive lace iro and buba a stark contrast to the faded wrappers worn by the village women who rushed forward to greet her. She smiled warmly, embracing them despite the heat, despite the way their rough hands snagged on her delicate fabric. This was her village too, even though sometimes she felt like a stranger in the place where she'd grown up fetching water from the stream and selling akara by the roadside. "First Lady, welcome o." Mama Ngozi called out, her voice cracking with emotion. "God has blessed you and Pastor so much. Look at how far you have come." Adiz's smile faltered for just a moment. Mama Ngozi looked older, more worn than she remembered. The woman's daughter, young Ngozi, had been part of the church's Victory Girls program, one of the initiatives that Chinedu claimed was giving rural girls opportunities for education and a better life. Adiz made a mental note to ask about the girl later. "Mama Ngozi, how are you? How is Ngozi?" "I haven't seen her at church in weeks," Adiz said, reaching for the older woman's hand. Something dark flashed across Mama Ngozi's face before she looked away. She is doing well, First Lady. She is in Port Harcourt now. Getting training. Pastor said she would have great opportunities." "That's wonderful," Adiz replied, though something in the woman's tone made her uneasy. "I check on her progress with Pastor." The afternoon dissolved into the familiar rhythms of her life as a pastor's wife. The village women crowded into their massive compound, a sprawling structure that seemed almost obscene in its opulence compared to the surrounding poverty. The main house had 12 rooms, generator power 24 hours a day, and a borehole that never ran dry while the village stream dried up every dry season. Adiz hosted the women's fellowship meeting, listening to testimonies of answered prayers and financial breakthroughs, leading worship songs that echoed across the village. But as the sun set and the women dispersed, carrying their small gift of rice and money that Adiz always distributed, she found herself alone in the vast living room, surrounded by Italian furniture and crystal chandeliers that seemed increasingly absurd. Chinedu had locked himself in his study as usual, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice too low for her to hear. She stood and walked to the study door, pressing her ear against the solid wood. Her husband's voice filtered through, sharp and businesslike, nothing like his anointed pulpit tone. "No, Chief Amodi, I told you the shipment must be clean. We can't afford any complications." "Yes, 3 more from the village. Fresh ones. The client in Abuja is paying top dollar for unspoiled goods." "What?" "No, my wife knows nothing. She's too busy playing Mother Teresa to the villagers." Adiz's blood turned to ice. Shipment. Unspoiled goods. What was her husband talking about? She stumbled backward, her wrapper catching on the doorframe. The study door flew open. Chinedu stood there, his face contorted with an anger she'd never seen in their 15 years of marriage. Gone was the gentle youth pastor who had courted her under the mango tree, who had promised to build God's kingdom alongside her. This man looked like a stranger. "How long have you been standing there?" His voice was deadly quiet. I just came to tell you dinner is ready," she stammered, hating how small her voice sounded. He studied her face for a long moment, his eyes calculating. Then his expression shifted, smoothing into the charming smile he used on camera during his televised crusades. "My dear wife, always thinking of me. I'll be out shortly. I'm just concluding some ministry business with Chief Amadi. He closed the door in her face. Adi stood frozen in the corridor, her mind racing. Chief Amadi was the traditional ruler of 3 neighboring villages, a man whose wealth had appeared mysteriously in the same timeline as Chinedu's rise to prominence. The 2 men were always locked in private conversations, always dismissing her when she approached. She'd always assumed it was boring church politics or men's fellowship planning. But shipment. Unspoiled goods. That night, Adiz lay awake beside her husband in their king-sized bed with its imported sheets, listening to him snore peacefully while her mind churned. The ceiling fan rotated lazily overhead, doing little to cool the oppressive heat that had nothing to do with the weather. She thought of Mama Ngozi's face, the way the woman's eyes had slid away when asked about her daughter. She thought of the other girls from the Victory Girls program, how they would arrive at the church compound excited and hopeful, and then gradually disappear with vague explanations about opportunities in the city, training programs, housemaid positions with wealthy families. How many had there been? 20. 30. She'd never kept count because Chinedu always made it sound so noble, so charitable. "We're giving these poor village girls a chance at a better life," he would announce from the pulpit while the congregation erupted in praise. But now those words tasted like ash in her memory. The next morning, Adiz woke with a mission. She waited until Chinedu left for a ministers' conference in Owerri, watched his convoy disappear down the red dirt road, and then she began to search. She started with his study, the room she'd been subtly forbidden from entering over the years. The door was locked, of course, but she'd seen where he hid the spare key, behind the framed photo of his late father. Her hands shook as she turned the key. The study was immaculate, everything in its place. Theological books lined the shelves, certificates and awards covered the walls. His massive desk held a computer, files, and his daily devotional. Everything looked perfectly normal, perfectly pastoral. But Adiz had grown up in this village, had learned from her grandmother how to find what people tried to hide. She ran her hands along the bookshelf until she felt it, a slight gap behind a row of commentaries. She pulled the books forward and found a small safe embedded in the wall. The digital lock blinked at her mockingly. She tried their anniversary. Wrong. Their children's birthdays. Wrong. She was about to give up when a memory surfaced, Chinedu whispering numbers in his sleep sometimes, always the same sequence. She thought it was biblical numerology, something pastors did. She punched in the numbers. The safe clicked open. Inside were 3 phones she'd never seen before, each labeled with tape. One said business. One said special projects. One said emergency only. There were also stacks of dollars and naira notes, more cash than she'd ever seen outside a bank. And beneath it all, a leather-bound ledger. Adiz pulled out the ledger with trembling hands. The pages were filled with names, dates, and amounts. But it was the column headers that made her stomach drop: acquisition, training period, placement, client, fee, status. She recognized the names. Ngozi Okofo. Chidima Nwankwo. Blessing is. All girls from the village. All girls who had gone through the Victory Girls program. Under status, some were marked active. Others were marked retired. 3 were marked disposed. Disposed. The ledger slipped from her hands, pages fluttering as it hit the floor. Adiz backed away from the desk, her vision blurring with tears. This couldn't be real. This had to be some terrible nightmare. But the evidence was there in black ink, in her husband's meticulous handwriting. Chinedu wasn't running a charity program. He was running a trafficking operation. The sound of a car engine jolted her back to reality. She frantically shoved everything back into the safe, locked it, replaced the books, and fled the study. She'd barely locked the door and replaced the key when she heard voices in the compound. Chinedu had returned early. Adiz rushed to the kitchen, splashing water on her face, trying to compose herself. She grabbed vegetables and began chopping them with shaking hands, playing the role of the dutiful wife preparing lunch. Adiz. Chinedu's voice boomed through the house. Where are you? In the kitchen, Dear, she called back, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. He appeared in the doorway, but he wasn't alone. Chief Amodi stood beside him, his round face glistening with sweat, his traditional wrapper and walking stick giving him an air of authority. Behind them were two young men Adis didn't recognize, their eyes cold and alert. My wife, I hope you can prepare something for our guest, Chinedu said, his smile not reaching his eyes. We have important business to discuss. Of course, Adis replied, keeping her gaze down. I'll bring you food in the parlor. No, Chief Amodi said suddenly, his voice sharp. We'll use the study. More private. Adis' heart nearly stopped. Had she left something out of place? Could they tell someone had been in there? The men fired into the study and closed the door. Adis stood in the kitchen, the knife still in her hand, listening to the low rumble of their voices. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was tense, urgent. Then her phone rang, a village number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. First Lady. The voice was barely a whisper, female, terrified. First Lady, is this you? Yes, who is this? It's Ngozi. Ngozi Okofo. Please, First Lady, you have to help us. We're trapped. There are 7 of us here. They bring men, different men, and we. The girl's voice broke into sobs. Adis gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. Ngozi, where are you? Are you hurt? We're in a compound somewhere outside the village. I don't know exactly where. I stole this phone from one of the guards. First Lady, they said Pastor is coming tonight to select girls for something special. Some man from Abuja is paying millions. Please, my mother doesn't know what really happened to me. They told her I'm in training. But this is hell, First Lady. This is hell. Ngozi, listen to me, Adis said, her voice fierce despite her terror. Stay strong. I'm going to find you. I'm going to get you out. All of you. I promise you. First Lady, be careful. Pastor is not who you think he is. The line went dead. Adis stared at the phone, her entire body trembling. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab her children from school and disappear. But those girls, those innocent village girls who had trusted the church, trusted her husband, trusted her, they were suffering because of her family's so-called ministry. She thought of her own daughters, safe in their expensive boarding school in Port Harcourt, wearing designer uniforms and eating 3 meals a day. She thought of them at the age of Ngozi and the others, broken and brutalized in some hidden compound. The decision crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity. She would stop this. Even if it destroyed her marriage, her status, her entire life. Even if it killed her. But she needed help. She needed someone outside the church's influence, someone Chinedu didn't control. Her mind raced through possibilities until she remembered Zainab Musa, the journalist from Abuja who had tried to interview her last year during the church's anniversary. Chinedu had dismissed the woman as a troublemaker, had forbidden Adis from speaking with her. At the time, she'd obeyed without question. Now she understood why he'd been so adamant. Adis found the woman's business card where she'd hidden it in her Bible, tucked into the book of Esther. For such a time as this, she whispered, dialing the number. Zainab answered on the second ring. Zainab Musa speaking. Miss Zainab, this is Adis Nwosu, Pastor Chinedu's wife. I need your help. I think my husband is trafficking young girls from our village, and I have evidence. There was a long pause. Then Zainab's voice came back, sharp and focused. Mrs. Nwosu, I've been investigating your husband for 2 years. I have testimonies from 3 girls who escaped, but I need more to build a case that will stick. If you're willing to help, we need to meet. Somewhere safe. There's an old colonial rest house on the outskirts of the village. It's abandoned. I can meet you there at midnight, Adis said, glancing toward the study where the men's voices had grown louder, more agitated. I'll be there. And Mrs. Nwosu. Be very, very careful. Men like your husband don't let go of their secrets easily. The hours until midnight crawled by like years. Addis went through the motions of her normal routine, serving dinner to the men who finally emerged from the study looking pleased with themselves, bathing her husband's feet as he watched the evening news, laying out his clothes for tomorrow's service. All the while, her mind was cataloging every detail, every conversation, every person who came and went from the compound. At 11:30, she told Chinedu she needed to check on a sick church member in the village. He barely looked up from his phone. "Don't be long. You know how I worry about you walking around at night," he said absently. The hypocrisy of his concern nearly made her laugh. This man who worried about her safety at night was the same man who had girls locked up somewhere, selling them to the highest bidder. Addis wrapped herself in a dark cloth and slipped out of the compound through the back gate, the one the servants used. The village was quiet, most people already asleep. The only sounds were night birds calling and the distant thrum of generators from the few compounds wealthy enough to afford them. The old rest house loomed against the star-filled sky, its colonial-era architecture crumbling but still imposing. Addis had played here as a child before it was deemed unsafe and abandoned. Now it served as a reminder of another empire built on exploitation. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Addis nearly screamed before recognizing Zainab. The journalist was younger than she remembered, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mrs. Nosu, thank you for reaching out," Zainab said, shaking her hand firmly. "I know this must be terrifying for you." "Those girls," Addis said, her voice breaking. "How long has he been doing this?" Zainab pulled out a tablet, showing her photos and documents. "Based on my investigation, at least 5 years. Maybe longer. He partners with Chief Amodi and several other traditional rulers across the region. They identify vulnerable girls, usually from poor families, and recruit them through the church program. The girls think they're getting education or job training. Instead, they are taken to various compounds and forced into prostitution for high-paying clients, politicians, businessmen, oil company executives. The ledger I found mentioned millions of naira," Addis whispered. "Your husband has built an empire, Mrs. Nwosu. Multiple compounds across 3 states. A network of clients. Money laundering through the church accounts. The Victory Girls program is just the recruitment arm. He's systematic, careful, and very, very protected. I've tried to publish this story twice. Each time, my editors killed it. Your husband has friends in very high places." Addis felt sick. "Ngozi called me today. She said there are 7 girls in some compound. She said Chinedu is coming tonight to select girls for a special client." Zainab's eyes widened. "Tonight? Do you know where?" "No, but I can find out. I check his phones, his messages. There has to be something. Mrs. Nwosu, if you do this, there's no going back. Your husband will know you betrayed him. These people, they don't just destroy reputations. They destroy lives. I have contacts in witness protection, but once you cross this line..." "Those girls are somebody's daughters," Addis interrupted, thinking of her own children. "I've been living off their suffering, sleeping in silk sheets bought with their pain. I have to do this. I have to." Zainab studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll be ready. If you can get me the location and proof of what's happening there tonight, I have a team ready to document everything. We need video evidence, the girls' testimonies, and ideally, we catch your husband and his clients in the act." They exchanged numbers and planned their next steps. Addis returned to the compound with her heart pounding, terrified that Chinedu would somehow know what she'd done. But he was exactly where she'd left him, snoring peacefully in their bed, one arm thrown over his face. She lay beside him, this man she'd loved, this man she'd built a life with, and felt nothing but revulsion and a burning determination to stop him. The next morning, Wednesday, Addis woke before dawn. Chinedu was already up, getting dressed in expensive casual wear, designer jeans and a crisp shirt. He was whistling, actually whistling, as he checked one of his secret phones. "You're up early," Addis observed from the bed. "Business meeting in Owerri," he said smoothly. I'll be back late tonight. Don't wait up. Okay. I love you, she said, the words tasting like poison. He kissed her forehead absently. Love you too. Make sure you prepare for Sunday's program. I want the women's ministry to do a special presentation on God's faithfulness. The irony was suffocating. As soon as his convoy left, Adi sprang into action. She had maybe 12 hours before he returned. She went back to the study, back to the safe. This time she took the business phone, the one she'd seen him checking that morning. The phone required a password. She tried several combinations before remembering something. Chinedu always used scripture references for his passwords, his way of justifying everything as God's work. She tried John 3 verse 16. Nothing. Philippians 4 verse 13. Nothing. Then she remembered his favorite prosperity scripture, the one he quoted every Sunday. 3 John 1 verse 2. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper. The phone unlocked. What Adis found in his messages made her run to the bathroom and vomit until there was nothing left. Messages arranging deliveries of girls. Photos of the compounds. Crude discussions of which girls were most popular with clients. Financial transfers showing millions of naira changing hands. Videos she couldn't bear to watch beyond the first few seconds. And there, in a message thread with Chief Amodi, the location, Old Okigwe Road compound. 8 p.m. Alhaji from Abuja confirmed. Bringing 5 million for the fresh selections. Make sure the new batch is ready. Adis took screenshots of everything, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. She sent them all to Zainab, then carefully returned the phone to the safe exactly as she'd found it. But she wasn't done. If she was going to destroy her husband's empire, she needed to see it with her own eyes. She needed to be able to look those girls in the face and tell them she knew, she understood, and she was fighting for them. She called her most trusted housemaid, Ifioma, a young woman from a neighboring village. Ifioma, I need your help with something dangerous. You can say no? Ifioma had been watching her carefully all morning. First Lady, I know something is wrong. You can trust me. Do you know where the old compound is on Okigwe Road? The one they say is haunted. Ifioma's face went pale. Yes, First Lady. But that place is not haunted. My cousin worked there as a guard for 2 months before he quit. He said terrible things happened there. Girls crying, men coming and going at night. He tried to tell people, but Chief Amodi threatened his family. I need to go there tonight. I need to see it for myself. Will you help me? Ifioma swallowed hard, then nodded. My cousin can show us how to get close without being seen. There's a back way through the bush. That evening, as the sun set over Omura village, Adis dressed in dark, simple clothes, nothing that would identify her as the pastor's wife. She told the security guard she was going to pray vigil at a member's house. He didn't question her. She was the First Lady. She was above suspicion. Ifioma met her 2 streets away with her cousin, Emeka, a lanky young man with frightened eyes. First Lady, this is very dangerous, he warned as they walked quickly through the darkening bush paths. If they catch us, they will kill us. These people don't play. I know, Adis said grimly. But we have to try. They approached the compound from the back, crawling through thick bush until they could see the buildings. It looked innocent enough from the outside, just another rural compound with a main house and several outbuildings, surrounded by a high fence. But as they crept closer, Adis could hear it, voices raised in argument, a girl crying, the sound of a generator running. There's a gap in the fence here, Emeka whispered, pointing to a section where the metal sheets didn't quite meet. We can see inside, but we have to be very quiet. Adis pressed her eye to the gap and felt her heart shatter. In the compound's courtyard, 7 girls sat on benches, all young, all looking terrified. They were dressed in cheap, revealing clothes, their faces painted with too much makeup. Guards stood around them, smoking and laughing. And then she saw him. Chief Amodi emerged from the main building, his walking stick tapping against the concrete. Behind him came 2 other men Adis recognized, elders from Victory Dominion Ministries, men who preached about holiness on Sundays. The Alhaji will be here soon, Chief Amodi announced. He wants the 3 youngest ones. Clean them up. Make sure they smile. Anyone who cries or fights will be dealt with. One of the girls, Adiz recognized her as Blessing started sobbing. A guard moved toward her threateningly, but Chief Amodi waved him off. Not the face. The client wants them perfect. Use the cane on her back instead. That will teach her. Adiz had to clamp her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Beside her, Ifeoma was crying silently, and Emeka looked like he might be sick. Then headlights illuminated the compound. A Mercedes pulled in, and Chinedu stepped out, looking relaxed and happy. He greeted Chief Amodi with a hearty handshake, slapping him on the back like they were old friends at a party. Everything ready? Chinedu asked. Perfect timing, Pastor. The Alhaji should be here in 30 minutes. These girls will make us rich tonight. Chinedu walked down the line of girls, inspecting them like cattle. When he got to Ngozi, the girl who had called Adiz, she looked up at him with such betrayal in her eyes that Adiz felt it in her own soul. Please, Pastor, Ngozi begged. Please, I want to go home. I want my mother. You said you were helping us. You said this was God's plan. Chinedu's face remained impassive. God's plan requires sacrifice, my dear. You're serving a greater purpose. Now stop crying. You're ruining your makeup. That was when Adiz knew with absolute certainty that the man she'd married no longer existed, if he ever had. This monster wearing his face had no conscience, no soul, no humanity left. She pulled out her phone and started recording, capturing everything: the girls, the guards, Chief Amodi, the church elders, and Chinedu casually discussing prices and preferences like he was selling cars instead of human beings. A new vehicle pulled up, larger, more expensive. A man in traditional northern attire emerged, flanked by bodyguards. The Alhaji had arrived. Oh, my friend. Chinedu called out, opening his arms. Welcome, welcome. We have exactly what you requested. Young, unspoiled, and completely untraceable. The Alhaji walked down the line of girls, and Adiz watched in horror as he selected not 3 but 5 of them, including Ngozi and Blessing. Money changed hands, thick stacks of naira notes that Chinedu counted with practiced ease. A pleasure doing business, the Alhaji said. I'll send for them tomorrow. Make sure they're properly prepared. That was when everything went wrong. One of the girls, a teenager Adiz didn't recognize, suddenly broke free from the line and ran for the gate, screaming for help. Guards rushed after her, and in the chaos, Adiz's phone slipped from her sweating hands and clattered against the metal fence. The sound was like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Who's there? A guard shouted, running toward their hiding spot. Run. Emeka hissed, pulling at Adiz's arm. They crashed through the bush, branches tearing at their clothes and skin, the sounds of pursuit close behind. Adiz's lungs burned, her heart felt like it would explode, but she kept running. Behind them, she heard gunshots, warnings fired into the air. They finally lost the guards in the thick bush, hiding in a dried stream bed while their pursuers crashed past them in the darkness. They lay there for what felt like hours, barely breathing, until the sounds faded. We have to tell someone, Ifeoma whispered. We have to stop this. We will, Adiz promised, though she'd lost her phone with all the video evidence. We will. They made their way back to the village through back paths, arriving just before midnight. Adiz thanked Emeka and Ifeoma, making them promise to stay silent until she could figure out what to do next. Then she slipped back into her compound, past the sleeping guards, and into her house. Chinedu was waiting in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in his hand. The phone she'd dropped at the compound. Looking for this, he asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. Adiz froze in the doorway. Chinedu, I can explain. He stood up, and she saw the rage burning in his eyes, barely controlled. You can explain why you were spying on my business. You can explain why you've been snooping through my things. You can explain why you were at the compound tonight. Your business. Adi's fear transformed into fury. You call trafficking innocent girls your business? Those children, Chinedu. Those are children from our village. From our church. Those girls are products, he said coldly. Resources. Do you think we got all this, he gestured around their luxurious bedroom, from tithes and offerings? Do you think your designer clothes and your children's expensive schools pay for themselves? You've been living off this business for years, Adis. You're just as guilty as I am. The accusation hit her like a physical blow. I didn't know, she whispered. You didn't want to know, he corrected. You were happy to be the first lady, to be respected and feared and envied. You never asked where the money came from. You never questioned anything. So don't act self-righteous now. I'm going to stop you, Adi said, standing straighter. I'm going to expose everything. Chinedu laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. No, you're not. Because if you try, I'll destroy you. I tell everyone you knew all along. I show them bank statements with your name on them. I make sure you lose your children. And if that doesn't work, his voice dropped to a whisper, accidents happen, my dear wife. The roads are so dangerous at night. People disappear all the time. He walked past her to the door, pausing to look back. You have until Sunday. Sunday, you stand beside me at that pulpit and smile like the perfect pastor's wife. You give your testimony about God's faithfulness. And then we'll forget this little episode ever happened. Or you learn exactly how far I'm willing to go to protect what I've built. He left her standing there, trembling with rage and terror and determination. Adis didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat on the bathroom floor and planned. She'd lost her phone with the video evidence, but Zainab still had all the screenshots she'd sent. That would have to be enough. And she had something even more powerful now, she'd seen it with her own eyes. She could testify. At dawn, she called Zainab from the landline in the kitchen while the servants were still asleep. It's worse than we thought, she told the journalist. I saw everything. The compound, the girls, my husband taking payment from the Al-Hoji. We have to move now, before he can hurt anyone else. I've already contacted my sources in the police, Zainab said. The honest ones, not the ones on your husband's payroll. But Mrs. Nwosu, they need hard evidence. Screenshots aren't enough. We need to catch them in the act again, with witnesses who can't be intimidated. Sunday, Adi said, the plan forming in her mind. He wants me to stand beside him on Sunday. The whole village will be there. The whole region watches our broadcast. What if I tell the truth instead? What if I expose him in front of everyone? He'll deny it. His lawyers will destroy you. You need more than accusations. Adis thought of the safe, of the ledger, of the phones full of evidence. I can get you everything. The ledger, the phones, bank statements. Everything. But I'll need help getting into the safe one more time. I'll send someone I trust, Zainab promised. A tech expert who can copy everything without leaving traces. But Adis, once we do this, your husband will know. You need to be ready to disappear with your children immediately after. I'm ready, Adis said, and she meant it. The next 2 days were the longest of Adis' life. She played her role perfectly, the dutiful wife preparing for Sunday service. She smiled at Chinedu across the breakfast table. She reviewed the women's presentation. She acted like nothing had changed. But on Saturday night, while Chinedu was at another meeting with Chief Amodi, Zainab's tech expert, a quiet young woman named Kayameka, came to the house disguised as a church member seeking counseling. In 30 minutes, she copied everything from the safe, every document, every phone, every incriminating piece of evidence. This is enough to bring down an empire, Kayameka whispered as she walked. Your husband and everyone connected to him. But First Lady, they will come for you with everything they have. Let them come, Adi said. Those girls deserve justice. Sunday morning dawned bright and hot. Adis dressed carefully in her finest Airo and Buba, her best jewelry, her most expensive geli. If this was going to be her last day as the pastor's wife, she would look the part. The church was packed, nearly 2,000 people crowded into the massive sanctuary. The choir sang, the band played, and the congregation danced with the fervor that had made Victory Dominion famous across the region. Cameras captured everything for the live broadcast that reached hundreds of thousands more. Chinedu preached with his usual charisma, weaving scripture with prosperity promises, bringing the congregation to their feet with shouts of "Amen" and "Preach, Pastor." He was magnificent, anointed, powerful. He was also a monster, and Addis was done protecting him. When he called her up for her testimony about God's faithfulness, she walked to the pulpit with her head high. The congregation erupted in applause. On the screens flanking the stage, her face appeared, larger than life. She took the microphone from her husband. He smiled at her, that warning smile that said, "Remember what I told you." Addis smiled back. Then she turned to face the congregation. "Good morning, Victory Dominion," she began, her voice steady. "I'm supposed to give you a testimony today about how faithful God has been to me and my husband. But I can't do that. I can't stand here and lie to you anymore." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Chinedu's smile froze. "The truth is, everything you see here, this beautiful church, our mansion, our cars, our lifestyle, it's all built on the suffering of innocent girls from this village and others like it." The murmurs grew louder. Chinedu reached for the microphone, but Addis stepped away from him. "Pastor Chinedu Nwosu, my husband, the man you call your spiritual father, is running a human trafficking operation. The Victory Girls program that we've been so proud of. It's a recruitment pipeline. Those girls aren't getting education or job training. They are being sold to wealthy men for sex." The sanctuary erupted in chaos. People shouting, some in denial, some in anger. The camera operators didn't know whether to keep filming or stop. Church elders rushed toward the stage. But Addis kept talking, her voice rising above the noise. "I have proof. Bank statements showing millions of naira from illegal sources. A ledger with the names of every girl who's been trafficked. Messages arranging sales. I've seen the compound where they keep these girls. I've watched my husband take payment for human beings." "She's lying," Chinedu roared, grabbing for her. "My wife is sick. She's been having mental problems. This is slander." Security guards surrounded Addis, but before they could reach her, the sanctuary doors burst open. Police officers poured in, led by Zainab and a senior officer Addis didn't recognize. "Pastor Chinedu Nwosu, you're under arrest for human trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy," the officer announced, his voice carrying through the sound system. The congregation watched in stunned silence as police handcuffed their pastor, as other officers moved through the crowd arresting church elders and trustees who tried to flee. Chief Amodi was dragged from his seat of honor, his walking stick clattering to the floor. Chinedu looked at Addis with such hatred that she actually stepped back. "You've destroyed everything," he hissed. "Everything we built." "No," she said quietly. "You destroyed it when you decided girls were less important than money. I'm just making sure everyone knows." As police led him away, the camera still rolling and broadcasting everything live across the region, Addis felt something break loose in her chest. Not her heart, that had broken days ago. Something heavier, older. The weight of complicity. The burden of willful ignorance. She turned to the shocked congregation, many of them crying, some angry, all confused. "I'm sorry," she said into the microphone, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I lived in luxury while your daughter suffered. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making this right." In the weeks that followed, the scandal consumed everything. The investigation uncovered 53 girls who had been trafficked through Victory Dominion Ministries over 7 years. 12 of them were dead. The rest were scattered across Nigeria and neighboring countries, slowly being located and rescued. Chinedu and his network faced dozens of charges. Chief Amodi and the corrupt elders would spend the rest of their lives in prison. The church's assets were seized to provide restitution for victims and their families. Addis lost everything: her status, her home, her marriage, her place in society. The village turned against her, some calling her a traitor, others calling her a hero. Her children struggled to understand why their father was in prison and why they had to live in a small apartment instead of their mansion. But every time doubt crept in, Addis thought of Ngozi's face when they rescued her from that compound, the way the girl had collapsed in her mother's arms, sobbing. She thought of Blessing, who was slowly healing in a trauma center. She thought of the 12 girls who would never come home. 6 months after that Sunday morning, Addis stood in a small office that served as headquarters for the survivors' advocacy organization she'd started. On the wall was a photo of all the rescued girls at their first group healing session. They looked fragile but hopeful, broken but not destroyed. Zainab walked in, carrying coffee and a folder of papers. The final conviction just came through. Chinedu got life imprisonment without parole. Chief Amodi got the same. It's over, Addis. You did it. Addis looked out the window at Umura village, at the red dirt roads and modest houses, at the people going about their daily lives. The massive church building stood empty now, a monument to greed and corruption. Someone had spray-painted across its front wall, "Never again." It's not over, Addis said softly. As long as there are men who see women as products and communities that look the other way, it's not over. But maybe we've made it a little harder for the next monster to hide. She picked up her phone and checked her messages. 3 new girls had reached out, survivors from other trafficking networks, asking for help. The work would never end. But Addis had learned something in the ruins of her old life. She'd learned that silence was complicity. That comfort could be a cage. That sometimes the cost of doing the right thing was everything you had. And she'd learned that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, strong enough to stand alone, strong enough to speak truth, strong enough to choose justice over everything she'd once called blessed. Her name was Addis Nwosu. She had been a pastor's wife. Now she was a survivor's advocate, a truth teller, a woman who had looked into the darkness of her own life and chosen to turn on the light, no matter what it cost. And in the faces of the girls she'd helped save, in the mothers who could finally sleep knowing their daughters were safe, in the community that was slowly learning to protect its own, she found something she'd never had in her mansion with her billionaire husband. She found purpose. She found redemption. She found peace. The story of the pastor's wife who discovered her husband's darkest secret wasn't just about betrayal and trafficking and corruption. It was about the moment when one woman decided that truth mattered more than comfort, that justice mattered more than status, that doing right mattered more than being safe. It was about the moment Addis chose to stop being complicit and started being courageous. And in a village in Nigeria where red dust still swirled around the roads and women still gathered under mango trees to talk, her story became a reminder that evil only thrives when good people do nothing. Addis had done something. And that made all the difference.